How do you get the two sides of the aisle to work together? And I guess, at least at the outset, in the situation you described with Scuduto and Fleischman, is there has to be willingness. You have to start with some willingness. But in your experience, you were city manager, maybe not throughout the whole period, but over quite a long period of time. So in your opinion, how do you get the two sides to work together?
Well, as I said, in the beginning, the first four or 5 years when you had Jerome Fleischman and John Scuduto together, the thing was to save the city. Everybody recognized, no matter if you were Republican or Democrat, you recognized we were in trouble and we have to do something. So let's put aside the petty politics and work for the city. Mm-hmm. And they did. And they were wonderful. And from an administrative point of view, that's the perfect thing, because I don't have to worry about the political infighting and this and that and so forth. All the efforts went into the city. Of course, 5 years down the road, when the crisis is more or less past, then politics reverts back to normal, And so I worked for my first 20 years with the city. I worked with councils that were Republican, Democrat, mixtures. And they were all good people. People love to get on politicians, and dump on them and so forth. But I can say, almost without exception, I can't think of a person that, and I wouldn't speak negatively against anyone anyway, but there were people that lived in Long Beach and wanted to do for their community. And they were good people, and my job was to, as the chief administrator, to sort of steer them in the directions which I thought were good for the city. With their recommendations and their leadership, we move forward, and you get through these things. There's always political shenanigans going on and political strife and so forth, but we were fairly fortunate, I think. I know my first 20 years here that we moved forward on a nice clip and went in the right direction, whether we were Republican or Democrat or whatever.
I guess to a degree, if you have reasonable people, whatever their political stripe, and the need is there for people to come together, they do. And then when the need dissipates a little bit, they will revert.
Remember after 9/11, we were all from the same, coming from the same direction.
We sure were.
How long did that last? I mean, it lasts for a period of time, and then you revert back to your previous behavior.
That's right.
But that's life, I suppose.
So speaking about different political stripes and people working together, can you tell me about any experience that you have or had with the late Larry Elovich and Al D'Amato, Senator D'Amato?
Okay, yes, I can. Well, Larry Elovich, when I first came in here, Larry Elovich in the early 70s, 71, 72, had been the Democratic leader in town. Mm-hmm. And he had run the Democratic Party and so on and so forth. And they suffered an ignominious defeat in November of 72, where 5 Republicans got elected to the city council, which was unheard of in this town, because people were very unhappy with the perceptions of Larry Elovich. So when I came into office, Larry Elovich was no longer in politics as such, but he was always out there, He was a lawyer in town and so forth.
He got involved with the Chamber of Commerce.
He got involved. The Chamber of Commerce, I have to say, was a moribund organization until he got involved with it, and him and Stanley Fleischman, and they made it a very flourishing entity. And we became good friends. And people warned me a lot about him. Watch out for Larry Elovich. I have to say, in all the years I was in office, he never asked me for anything untoward, anything improper. One thing he asked me is to give an old school friend of his if I could find a job for him, which I happened to be able to comply with and find for him. But otherwise, he was a good friend, and so I knew him pretty well. Senator D'Amato, he sort of came in when we came in, 1980. And
the two were fast friends. The two were buddies friends, and had been, and they worked across
Mr.
the
Democrat,
aisle.
Mr. Republican, fast friends. That's right. And, Senator D'Amato, I guess our first dealing with him was, there's a plaza in town, Wallbound Plaza.
Yep.
That was a block that had a bunch of burned out stores on it. 50% of the stores were burned out. And
the north side of Park.
The north side of Park. Wallbounds used to be located where Pier 1 is now, down on Long Beach Road and Park. Mm-hmm. And they had a small store, and they came to us and they said, look, we need a bigger store. That's the economics of the supermarket business. And if we can't get one, we have to leave town. Well, Wallbounds was the supermarket in Long Beach. So we did something. We condemned property on that block where the plaza is currently located. We went after federal funding from HUD, Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Mm-hmm.
We were working on that. The federal government was driving us nuts. We would come up with a proposal, no, they turned it down, so on and so forth. So out of frustration one day, I called Senator D'Amato's office. I explained to his associate what the problem was. She got back to me in 15 minutes. She says, okay, get on the shuttle Monday, bring everybody down to Washington. You're meeting with Secretary Pierce. Sam Pierce was the Secretary of HUD. We went in 10 minutes. They agreed to something we had proposed, and they had turned down a year ago. And D'Amato's person that was there said, could you come back to the office and call the local papers and tell them how the senator was? I said, be my pleasure. I would have genuflected in front of it at that point. And so I went back to the office, and his associate was in there, and there were 4 newspapers in town at the time, and I called all of them. And I told them what a great job, due to his intercession, we're getting this $10 million grant. And this is our senator, and that was our senator. That was my introduction to our senator. And then I got to know him over the years, and he was always very good for Long Beach, I have to say.
He was.
He was good for Long Beach.
Good for his own people.
Good for his own people.
That was his job.
That was his job, yes. It was Senator Pothole, as he was designated at the time. Yeah,
he was.
So
now, in present time, we have some of the old challenges, but we also have new challenges. What's the character of the West End going to be like, vis-a-vis flood insurance and people trying to lift their homes and people who didn't have insurance because maybe they owned them homes outright and so forth. What are some of the things you would do or might do or would think of to do to deal with some of these issues?
Well, that's a good question. I guess a number of months ago, the current city manager, and I get together periodically for lunch. And he's been in office 2 years. He came in his first year in office. He had a financial crisis where the city was almost broke. He inherited a terrible position. And then we had the storm. So he had a baptism by fire. And in our most recent discussion, I said, I sort of envy your position. He says, what do you mean? I said, it's very similar to what I had. You're going to rebuild the city now. Like, we had a chance when we were there to rebuild the city. And now you're going to have a chance. It's going to be different, but you have a chance to do something. That makes it exciting. I think they're making all the right moves. I really do, with what they're doing. I've been removed away from it for 5 years now, so I don't know the cast of characters that much anymore, and and I've dealt with some of these entities of the federal government. But it seems like everybody's coming from the same direction with this, which is good. And I feel fairly confident. I remember I went up there May of 2013. I went up to the city manager's office, and the Public Works Commissioner was there, and we were talking. And he said, well, we're going to have the boardwalk ready in November. I said, which year?
They did?
He said, this year. And they did.
Yeah.
They did. And
there was a lot of skepticism.
A lot of skepticism, and I was skeptical because I know how these things work, and fortunately the federal officials came through for Schumer, and with the money from the federal government. It's a different world now.
Right.
And it's something I never really had to deal with to that extent. And it'd be a learning experience for me if I was up there. I remember each year I was in office, we would go to a hurricane conference, and they would tell us, representatives from the federal government, about what's going to happen if the big one hits. You're going to have to evacuate everybody south of Sunrise Highway, and everybody's going to get flooded. And we would sit there and roll our eyes. I've lived here 57 years, and it's never happened. Well, it happened. It was the perfect storm, or the imperfect storm, however you want to categorize it, but all the elements made it happen. And it's something you just can't plan for.
But you have to.
But you have to. And I think they did a good job. They did a good job getting rid of the debris in town. They did a good job rebuilding in town. So I have nothing but kudos for what they are doing.
Do you think the powers that be will come together the way they did for the boardwalk and help the West End and these areas that the character of which are really threatened? There's concern that the West, parts of it could end up like the 70s because people won't be able to stay.
Well, you go into the West End now, and I had a gentleman at the house this morning, a contractor at the house, working at the house doing something. And he was commenting about the character of the West End with a tower here, a tower there, and amidst the bungalows, But I guess that's the world we're living in now with FEMA rules. If you want to get flood insurance, you have to be a certain height. So the city has to bend a little and waive height requirements. I know the height requirement in the West End was 20 feet. Well, anything now, what is it, 28?
Yeah, I'd like to have my floor there.
Yeah, exactly. So there's going to be changes, and the whole character to town, I'm afraid, is going to change because of that. But what else can we do? Can't get flood insurance? Then where do you stand when the next one comes, if the next one comes? Which probably it will come. Hopefully not in our lifetime, but, it's a whole new set of problems, which I don't have the answer for. I'm not that familiar with it, to be honest with you.
No, and I'm not sure anyone has the answer. These things evolve and not in a planned way.
No, exactly.
So,
no, go.
What is your life like now, and what are your plans for the future?
Well, I still live in Long Beach. I got remarried. My wife passed away about 9 years ago now, and I married a young lady who I worked with in the city, as a matter of fact. And I retired in January of '08 for good this time. And I got reacquainted with something when I was in college 40 some odd years ago. I minored in art history. Mm-hmm. And a few years ago, Carolyn and I took a trip to Italy. I'd never been there before. Well, art history, Italy.
Heaven.
It's heaven. So I go back each year by myself now on cultural excursions. I just came back last week. And so I guess I've gone back to my youth, so to speak, so that part of my education wasn't for naught, So I'm enjoying myself just by studying art and art history and Renaissance art and so on and so forth. So I'm using my brain in that respect. My wife feels I should go back to work, but I've done that. So, I want to use my brain now for other things.
Yeah, you're kind of getting younger in a way.
And then, yeah, that's right, exactly, because it's too short a life. I guess we've reached the stage in our life now where we're seeing contemporaries pass away. Yeah. Larry Elovich, people like that. Sure. And you start to feel a little more mortal. And if you're going to do something, you better do it now. And because you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. So I guess I'm getting a little more philosophical in that respect. And so let's do it. It's the only life we have, as far as I'm concerned. And so I want to see what's out there and take advantage of it as much as I can. And fortunately, I'm in a position I can do that. So.
Very cool. Thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure.
Great.